Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and I'm alive. The second time.
Yeah, I'm glad that you are alive. For those who are listening, we are recording this for the first time. The first episode record after Sam survived Hurricane Milton. Rode the whole thing out right there in Bradenton.
I did, and this is our second take, so that's why I said I'm alive the second time, because I didn't do this episode correctly, and so we had to re-record it.
But also you have been, born
there.
again. So you are alive for a second time.
Well, I did survive 2 major hurricanes within 2 weeks.
That's true.
And the second one, Milton, the backside of the eye wall, because we were dead center. We were right on the eye, and that backside of the eye wall was like nothing I've ever experienced. It's the worst that I've ever been in. So, and I've done a few of those storms.
Mm-hmm. It was a very, very strong storm. So we are so thankful. Sam is still alive and still on the show. We're also going to continue to pray for those who have still continued damage, continue to recover from the damage of these 2 storms that impacted Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, parts of Tennessee. So just want to continue to pray for everybody involved.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate it. We need it, and we're very grateful for everyone that stepped up and helped. Some of our listeners did, and so I'm just very grateful for those of you who chipped in, sent donations and supplies and whatever it was that you did. Thank you. Mm-hmm. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, so like who did what, I don't really know, but I know that I did know that there were things coming. So thank you. I also want to say thank you to Church Teams, our sponsor. They have been a longtime sponsor of the show. You should go check them out at their website. You should go to churchteams.com, and they can help you out with any of your software needs. They connect people. They empower leaders. They have this innovative church management software system that gives you the tools that you need to focus less on tasks and more on people, and I like that. So we're grateful for Church Teams for all that they do. Boyd Pelly, and he's been on the show before. He kind of leads the organization, does an amazing job. So you can reach out to them at their website, churchteams.com.
That's right. Brand new interface, and well worth your time in checking that out. A service for a lot of churches. If you do not have a church management software, or even if you do, check out Church Teams. All right. Kind of a tough topic, but one to think about. It's sort of an area in my own life that once I was made aware of this sort of reality, it really helped me not only in my pastorate, but also in my emotional and mental health. Sam, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, we're talking about necessary goodbyes. And what we mean by this is sometimes people leave. That can be people in your church, that can be staff, that can be other area pastors, or sometimes you leave. And when people leave, how do you deal with that? And obviously it depends on who it is, where they're going, and why. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But this is the way I grew up. You kind of did too. Weren't you military? I mean, I moved around like every 2-3 years.
Yeah, we did. We moved out around quite a bit. When I was a child, I never went to a school longer than 2 years, just about. Even when I tell that to people, they're like, well, were your family military? And they were. However, we mainly lived in the same town. We just moved a lot in that town. So I always joke that now that I'm an adult, I think my parents were running from the mob or owed somebody money or something because we were constantly moving, but we were in the same town. So I'm not sure why we were moving, all of that. I was a child. But you bring up childhood, Sam. I think that this is one of those things we don't think through well. We're not often taught how to grieve the loss of something, nor the necessity of something being lost. So, if you go back to agricultural days of old, children grew up knowing that things die and that their death was not always a bad thing. That's how you put food on the table. There's seasons of growth, seasons of death. However, through industrial revolution and technology and these sort of things, we no longer deal with or grapple with death. Not very much. Your pet never dies. They just go off to live on a farm. Those kind of things. You never know or experience that. And death is a very final goodbye. But there's also other sides of goodbye that are not necessarily bad. I tell my staff all the time, or not all the time, but I have made these comments before. It's very unlikely that our student minister or, your college minister or your children's minister is going to retire in that role. Normally, there's some sort of transition in the role, whether it's within the organization or by moving on to another church. And since that is a reality, then that means at some point there's going to be a goodbye. There's going to be a difference in the conversation. So as pastors and as leaders, we need to shepherd people through necessary goodbyes, friendships, those sort of things. But then we also need to absorb that blow ourselves. And we've broken this down into 4 kind of categories to just kind of talk through it. But the first one is people. Sam, has anyone ever left your church?
Yeah, actually, lots, and for many different reasons. And we're talking about the necessary goodbyes where they're healthy, and it tugs at your heartstrings, and they got the job, and they're moving to a different state. Mm-hmm. People have left my church for a variety of reasons. Let's just talk about the ones where I'm thinking of my friend Larry and how he just got a job up in Ohio, and it's a really, really good job for him. He and his wife and his whole family, very big supporters of the church, faithful. They're all the time, involved in lots of ministries, and I went over to his house right before he left, just to say goodbye, and they were all packed up and stuff, and it was hard, but I was happy for him. I mean, he had been hoping for something like this, without getting into details of his career. He'd been hoping for something like this, and he got it, and it's a really good thing for him. So I'm happy, but it's also sad because he's not going to be at the church anymore. I can text him, I can call him, he'd pick up the phone in a heartbeat, but it's just not the same. So I think that, every pastor, church leader is going to have these moments where, like, man, that was one of my best people, and now they're not here anymore. And I think the posture, I think you should have closure. So what do you do? What do you do? I think it's good to have closure. I think it's good to stop by. I think it's good to have that, that last meal together, whatever it is. I think it's good to, say something. I think people need that closure because it helps with the process of moving on.
I think it would even, there may be some health in just starting, knowing that not all relationships in your life are, I guess in our culture and in our current world, are built or made, or there should be an expectancy of, some sort of lifelong relationship in the same way that it is. Now it'll change and grow. Obviously, your spouse and your children, those will be lifelong. But outside of that, most of these relationships will come and go. And so once you see that it's not something that you're collecting, but something you're stewarding for a short period of time, then it helps you to sort of redeem that time, to be thankful for it, and then to celebrate it as it goes forward. I think another reason that this could be helpful is one of the reasons that we struggle with church planting or localized sort of church planting, neighborhood churches or campusing, is that a lot of us have a very hard time with letting go of the people that we have collected and knowing that we're stewarding so that we can invest in some of that's going to be these relationships and these people. Then a healthy understanding of that stewardship relationship as opposed to the collecting relationship may help us with the inevitable goodbye.
Yeah, and you don't know when these relationships will cycle back around.
Right.
I just went through a hurricane. I filed a claim. I hadn't yet. I sent a message, let me put that way, to my agent, and I hadn't heard back. I didn't think much of it because everybody is reaching out to their agent. So I messaged my previous insurance agent, who was a really good friend, a member of my church, my previous church. I hadn't heard from him since I left, but I just messaged him. I said, hey, I'm not asking for anything, but what's just a reasonable expectation that I should have of my agent before I start, calling every day and stuff? And he helped me out. And it was just like really, we talked on the phone, caught up a little bit, and, he gave me the answer that I needed. Like, okay, everything's fine, basically. But it was like, everything's good.
Yeah.
no problem here. Just be patient.
Right.
They're probably dealing with people who don't have a house anymore and don't have vehicles. And since you have a vehicle and your house is not gone, you're just not as much the priority. And I said, that makes perfect sense. And sure enough, actually the agent called, shortly thereafter. But just that reconnection with somebody who I hadn't had, and I had a reason to call them. So I guess what I'm saying is don't burn these bridges. Like, I don't know why you would. It would be kind of silly to do that. But get that closure that you need and keep the lines of communication open. Text someone every now and then. You think about them. Maybe it's like 2 years have passed and you're like, what, I'm just going to text them. Let them know I'm thinking about you. And for whatever reason, Holy Spirit led me to pray for you. So while the relationship may not be the same, I do think that you should continue to foster some sort of connection to the people that you really love.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have another category here, staff. And so if you're a lead pastor, you're going to have the staff that are under you. They're going to serve at different times in different ways. That's a strange relationship because it is both professional, but then there's a slight element of family feel to it, or at least there's some language around it. I think that's unhealthy, but it is there. But then there's also this other layer of just being a church member, and now they're drifting off in another direction. Sam, why does that get so hairy when people leave?
It shouldn't. So I've always told my staff, if God is calling you elsewhere or you feel like the season might be ending, I would prefer you let me know ahead of time than just giving me a 2-week notice. Now, there are people that are listening to this that would say, the moment I say anything in my church, let's say they're a staff person, the moment I say anything in my church, I'm basically getting let go. And I think that's a really unhealthy culture.
Yeah, you may want to leave if that's the culture.
Right, yeah. I wouldn't recommend even, it's probably time to get your resume out.
Yeah.
But I would but that does happen. I've heard, I don't know how many of those stories before, not just churches, but nonprofit organizations, too, Christian nonprofit organizations. I would much rather hear ahead of time that somebody's thinking church planting, or, hey, I'm a student pastor, but I want to be a lead pastor, or whatever the transition may be, or, hey, my mom's just not doing well. I need to move back to, wherever I'm from. Please, I want to help you do that.
Right.
It's going to be a much healthier transition if I'm involved in the process, because now we can make sure that you have what you need. And I realize that if you're a staff person, you're going, yeah, I don't have that kind of relationship with my lead pastor. I don't know that my lead pastor wants that kind of relationship. I understand. I'm talking more ideals, but there are times when staff have transitioned. They've come and talked to me. They've been very clear and upfront, and we've been able to work through it. And honestly, we were able to honor them and their family as they move to the next thing. And I was able to help expedite the process. I don't want people sitting around for a year or two like, man, I want to be somewhere else, but I just can't get there. Like, well, let me help you get there, because you're not going to be as much of a benefit at my church if you're wishing you were somewhere else.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you are a lead pastor and you're listening to this and you haven't had this conversation with your staff, then I would encourage you to have that conversation. If you can handle it, then go ahead and have it. I tell my staff, the second you feel like, I think I'm just wanting to go off, let me know. We can work that out. Or, I don't necessarily need to know if another church contacts you or something like that, but I would like to know if you want to entertain it and those sort of things. And every time that happens, when a staff person comes up to me and says, look, this church called me, or I'm starting to feel like I'd like this position or that position, it's a good, healthy conversation. And I love sitting in those conversations and providing some wisdom and some insight and helping. There's also so many other things that we have to think about as far as just salary adjustments at the end of the year. If I know somebody's, on their way out, then that's a different kind of thought in my brain as I'm planning ahead. Those sort of things. So I think that's helpful. I will also say that even though I have that conversation with all the staff, there have been a handful that didn't. They just show up and like, hey, I took another job. I'm starting tomorrow. I'm going to go to the church down the street. Every single time there was something shady going on. There was almost always, we found out later, money's missing, or they were gossiping, or they thought they should have some other position that they didn't get. And so there was an undermining of that. So I think there needs to be a mutual respect both ways. And this is just one of those things about being a grown up, being a Christian, and saying, hey, I'm going to go off. But I would just say, if you are the supervising role, it is foolish for you to get upset, to act like you own this staff in a way that they are not allowed to ever leave. Now, they should leave properly. Like I said, I'm leaving tomorrow and I'm going to church across the street. That's shady. That's wrong. But I'm just moving back to where my mom lives, or I would like this kind of role, or there's just something different. Then, I mean, that's part of it. Help them out with that. So that's a necessary transition and a good thing.
Yeah, and you said something that I think is very important. I don't want to know about every little thing that you might entertain or every time somebody contacts you.
Yeah.
Only when you're like, you know what, I really do think God's leading me in this direction. That, you don't need to be going to your supervisor or lead pastor or whatever every time something comes your way.
Yeah.
It really is only when you're kind of set in your mind that this is what I need to do.
Yeah, it might happen.
Another necessary goodbye is with other pastors in the area. I have really good friendships with a lot of pastors in my community. Some of them have moved on and been good moves for them. I miss them a lot. Scott Douglas, leaving me here in Florida. I'm just going to call him out. I don't know that he listens to every episode. I hope he's listening to this one. He actually made a really good move, and his church is doing well, his new church, and I'm very, very happy for him. Just sad that he's not here anymore. I miss my friend.
Yeah, he needs to come down and get a chainsaw.
No, you know what? He's the one. He did reach out and he said, "Hey, we're gonna get a team. Or, cool. He was ready to. Let me just put it this way. He was ready to come. He actually messaged me and said, "How many chainsaws do you need?" And I was like, funny. "Bring them on, man. Bring them on."
I'm trying to think. I've never had this experience actually. In Conway, where I was pastoring in Arkansas, those pastors just get in those churches and stay there for eternity. And when they leave churches, they just move to another church in the same county. So it wasn't like there's not a lot of leaving Arkansas. Here, pastors come and go in the DFW area, but there's just so many of them, and you might not be around them quite a bit. But I can't imagine that being quite a challenge, and something that would be hard to, it's just hard to deal with as your buddy goes off in another direction. So that's a problem. There's another category for these kind of transitions as well, and that's you. You make changes. You go to other places, and I've done it. I'm in my third lead pastorate. I don't even know. I haven't added up how many churches I've been on staff at. I think that's okay. Some people think that that's bad. I got accused of climbing the ladder. It was on social media when I came here to Louisville, and somebody was just really mean, like, well, you just climbing that ladder, celebrity pastors. And I was like, yeah, that's a crazy ladder to go from a church that's one size to one that's half its size. It's a very weird ladder. But yeah, we make moves for several different reasons, and we just have to understand that those sometimes are necessary goodbyes. And it's not bad. What's something that you would encourage somebody on how to weather those changes?
Yeah, so I've transitioned 6 times, not my gender, church. And in today's world, you can say that, I transitioned 6 genders, and people go, okay, good for you.
Yeah, you can say it. Still doesn't make any sense. But
I'm being a bit facetious and probably insensitive, but still. So I would say this. 5 of those I feel like were good. 1, to this day, I'm still wondering, did I do the will of God? Did I really need to transition to another church? And I don't know. And I've talked about that before. I won't camp there, but my motive was pure, and I don't think I was sinning. It's just I don't know that I did God's will on that one. So I'll speak from the perspective of the 5 that I think, you know what, those were right on. I think those were exactly what I should have been doing. 1, give yourself time to make sure that you meet with everyone that you need to meet. Don't just up and leave. It's a bit of a whirlwind. You're moving, and you're really ready to get to the next spot. And you've got to get everything packed up, and banks changed and addresses changed and all that, and find a new house, and that's hard. But you still should take the time to sit down with the people that you love and have a conversation with them. The other part is, who do you tell and when, and how many do you tell before you go?
Yeah.
I tend to lean more on the side of tell as few people as possible before you make the announcement, just because things get out. And in today's world of quick communication via text or whatever, things get around pretty quickly. And I would also say that, you should communicate clearly with people as to why, because they're going to want to know. And you should tell them, it's like, hey, this is just, I feel called to Florida. I feel like God is telling me to go. And if that's the reason, great. And just be upfront with people. I don't think you need to be negative. I think you need to stay away from, if you're transitioning well, and you want to leave behind a church that you love, but you're being called to a new one, I would just say there is no reason to be negative. No reason at all. Do not burn those bridges on your way out.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's also so much nuance, and it depends on your situation, and we understand that. But tell who you need to tell. Be direct. Be truthful. Don't necessarily be negative. Sometimes the transition, like for me, it was a stress level. It was a health thing. I just didn't think I could stay in a place and stay healthy, stay alive, physically. And so I needed to go, and that was the reality. And so I transitioned. I changed out of that position, and I have learned that was a very wise move to make, and much healthier spot, both physically and mentally. So you got to do what you got to do. And I would just encourage you, there are necessary goodbyes in your life. You ought not carry any guilt or shame with that. You do what's best for you and your family and follow God. I've left places where I followed the book exactly. I've left places where I didn't. And in both cases, everybody was mad. And there are people all accusing me of this, accusing me of that. And there's a handful that still stay. And so all you can do is be faithful and do what God calls you to do. And then the opinions of others and the gossip train and all that, you can't control that. So don't carry that with you. We're talking about necessary goodbyes.
Yeah, people will hate you for like a year, and then they'll come around. It's just, you're the one leaving, and they get kind of mad. Maybe mad's not the right word, frustrated or upset. And then a year or two passes, and people kind of settle down, and then they remember all the good stuff. So just don't burn that bridge on the way out. And then you never know, you'll be the glory days. People talk about your tenure as if these were the glory days, and you're like, they weren't when I was there, but I'm glad you think so now.
That dude was a snake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good.
And one more necessary goodbye, and that is to our listeners. But it's kind of a goodbye and a hello.
It's a transition.
It's a transition, yeah. So Josh and I are going to be moving our conversation to Rainer on Leadership. Right. And we want you guys to know that. It's another podcast that I've been doing with my dad. So everything that you've been hearing here at EST will continue. Same format, same kind of discussions, same hosts, hopefully same sponsor even. I think Church Teams is going to move with us. That is the goal. I believe we're going to be able to do that. We're very, very grateful for that. There's some business reasons for this and some podcast stat reasons that I just won't get into. We're actually doing very well here at EST. We're more on a peak, more on a peak than we are down in a trough when it comes to listeners. And we hear from many of you, but that's often a good time to make a move. So we're going to be going over to Rainer on Leadership please subscribe. You can also check out the Church Answers YouTube channel. You'll find everything there. Many of you maybe are already be listening to Rainer on Leadership, but we're going to be moving our conversation over there, and we're going to be having 2 episodes released every week on Rainer on Leadership, and some special episodes, and we've got lots of good content there. So if you have enjoyed this season with us, it's going to continue, just in a different location. So we're moving addresses. So please, we're gonna do this to the end of the year. So this is not like the last episode,
Right.
but we also have a special surprise coming for the last couple of episodes.
And you're gonna want to listen to that.
Yeah, I won't spoil it. I won't spoil it.
I won't spoil it either, but you're definitely going to want to tune in and make sure that you're subscribed here. Go ahead and subscribe to Rainer on Leadership. Like Sam said, there's going to be 2 episodes a week, and so even more content, greater content, broader reach. EST will sunset for the moment, and that will be how it is. But as Sam said, same great conversation, just over at a different address. But that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to EST, and we will catch you next week.